welcome back to So There I Was podcast. I'm your host again, Travis Womack. Today's special guest is Mark Reilly, 20-year veteran of the Army and a former Old Guard alum like myself. Did 20 years all in the Fife and Drum Corps, for those who don't know, and I'll let Mark kind of explain what that is, but they wear the old Continental redcoats and do some really cool drumming and marching. They're known for some pretty cool stuff. But Mark, welcome. He's also the president of the Washington Tattoo, which does military performances all over the world. But Mark, we'll go into that, I'm sure. So welcome to the show.
Awesome, Travis. Thanks for having me. This is an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
So, well, like I said, man, I mean, we could probably spend a couple of days talking about the Old Guard,
Right.
and tell some So There I Was stories. And so we'll definitely get into some good ones because there's nothing like standing at attention for about an hour. So that starts a good story. But let's talk about Washington Tattoo, what you're doing there first, and kind of what started that and where did it come from and what are y'all doing?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, the Washington Tattoo is a veteran-led nonprofit. We actually support veterans, first responders, and families with mental health through music wellness. And that's been the catalyst of this entire thing. So back in 2005, I was a guest performer at the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo in Australia. And I was able to meet a bunch of folks that was down there. I actually was a member of the top secret drum corps. So it's kind of a hired mercenary. And so if people like YouTube phenoms and tossing sticks and lighting them on fire, I did that for a few years as I was a member of the Old Guard. So 2005, went to Australia, met a man named Eric Juilliard who runs the group, but he was also starting an international tattoo with the help of the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo team. So they took the template of the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, which is a huge music festival in front of the Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. It's about a month long. It's the entire month of August. And each show is roughly about 10,000 spectators. And it's, awesome. Military bands, drill teams, dancing groups from all around the world. So the producer said to me, "Hey, Mark, why does DC not have a proper tattoo?" And I said, "Well, they kind of do. We have one at 8th and I, we have one at Fort Myer, we have the Twilight Tattoo." And he said, "But it's not really scalable. Like that's only an Army one or that's only a Marine one. How about putting something together really huge?" And so he was on me for about 15 years, just hounding me.
No pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And then when he got his Sir status, and now he's Sir Melville Jameson, I think I had to kind of listen up. So long story short, in 2019, we started the nonprofit to actually build a world-class, full-scale military tattoo here in DC. And last year, what has been great is we partnered with the British Embassy and the British Ambassador, and we started to build that out here in DC. So we had music acts from Australia, a bagpipe rock band from Glasgow, Commandant's Own Marine Drum and Bugle Corps, of course, work with the Old Guard. So really super excited about it, but the tattoo is really taken off, and we're really excited about it.
That's awesome. That's it's funny. Back in the day when I was in command, I used to joke with the drill team. We had this idea of doing the flash drill.
Yeah.
Like coordinate with the Washington, police and all the different legal people. So they knew, hey, guys are going to jump out of a van. The idea was take like 5 guys in like a Old Guard van in uniform, and they just jump out and just do a flash, like 1-minute performance, get back in the van and leave.
Yep.
So all the civilians are like, "What the heck just happened?"
Yeah, which you could probably pull that off in DC pretty well, and it almost not be normal, but you could pull it off without really a ton of questions.
Yeah, we talked to the chief of the DC police, and he's like, "Please don't."
Yeah, exactly.
We're like, come on, it'd be cool. He's like, "It'd be great. I'd love to watch it, but don't."
I love it.
It's good times. So what's the next big thing y'all have going on there?
Well, it's great. So, during the pandemic, of course, everything shut down. Right. So we did a podcast as well, started the Washington Tattoo podcast and brought some different folks on. We were able to interview the head of the Scottish government in the United States, Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly. And honestly, it was just like folks who became friends of ours. And so as it started to build, we won a bunch of grants, National Endowment for the Arts grant, a Scottish government grant, and brought in some sponsors. And so we've had monthly events, partnering with Purple Heart Foundation, George Mason University. They have a Veterans in the Arts program, and they start to study the neuroscience behind what music does. So if I'm driving in the car and I hear my favorite tune, like I get amped, right? And I go to the gym, I hear the same thing. My brain fires a very specific way when I hear that tune. If I start to sing along to that tune, your brain actually does something very different. And so this concept of what music can do with your brain, with people with PTSD, folks with TBI, folks that have Alzheimer's disease, the brain just does a lot of different things when it engages with music. And so
Yeah.
each month we've been having these kind of outreach events. It's on our website. And then this coming April, what we have is called the Tartan Week. So Tartan Week is the Scottish version of St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And so it's basically the Scottish national holiday for the United States and North America. So in the first week of April, we're going to have a bunch of events partnered again with the British Embassy. Super excited about it. And there's potentially a work in progress with the Military Women's Memorial for a larger event in October. So April and October are going to be our two big months this year in 2024.
Awesome. And these are free events for people to go to.
Yeah, it's a
Or
mix. It's a mix.
yeah.
Some of them are ticketed and some of them are free. And we
Okay.
always want to do it that way so that,
Yeah.
obviously we can raise funds, but we definitely want to get stuff out to the public for free.
Absolutely. That's great. Is that related to anything about the I mean, there's a few years back, gosh, I'd say a few years back, 2010 maybe. There's a big deal about Mozart music, and like hospitals used to give a Mozart CD to new
Yes.
moms to play because like they learn how like something about brain development. I'm speaking it's about the extent of my
No,
knowledge of this, but
no, it's totally true. Yeah, yeah. So there's a woman so Dr. Dokai is the director of the Veterans in the Arts program, and she is a peer-reviewed qualitative researcher, and she gets all of the data that goes there. And that's one program that Mason has that we've partnered with. A second program that they have is not only for veterans, it's called Healing in the Arts. And Rita Giladi is a fantastic human being where she studies the waves, like sound waves. And there are certain sound waves. And if you think about it, even in warfare now, we're using sonic, we're using the sonorities of different wavelengths to cause damage, or they can do the reverse.
The crowd control thing does that. It makes you feel like you're on fire. This is all the sound wave. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they've been doing the research on positive and negative sound waves. And that Mozart wave, that's where they started to stumble on that classical music at certain decibels will actually make your brain again fire in different ways that some people say make you smarter, but it just makes your brain act differently.
Interesting. I think that's a great cause for people to be aware of, like that.
Yep.
There's you and I are a little bit older, but there's back in the day when it was like when the parental advisory label came on CDs. You remember that whole argument?
Absolutely.
And how people argue like, oh, this is what you're listening to. Well, it does matter what you're listening to. It makes your brain function. Like you don't go to the gym and listen to Mozart. You want like that beat because it affects your mood.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you create playlists, and this is one of the things we started to do, we created a program called Rudiments to Opportunity and Rudiments to Recovery. And it's been partnered with Loyal Drums. Edward Krizik and Dave Loyal have been huge parts of this as well. And you're taking these basic building blocks of drumming. So, single strokes, double strokes, triple strokes, and you play these patterns. But what we started to do is build these Spotify playlists. And the Spotify playlist that you play along to per generation of veteran are all going to be different. So your older veterans are going to be, into like bebop and, big band. And then, maybe your 60s and 70s generation veterans, you're going to be into kind of classic rock, Leonard Skinner and things like that. Right. And then you start getting into 80s and 90s, you start kind of getting into metal and grunge and all of that.
Bands.
Totally. Yep. Gotta love me some Def Leppard. But then you start to get into what guys are listening to at the gym now. And I mean, you're talking about, it's just, some of the darkest of metal bands.
Right.
And that can be good and bad. So if people program separate playlists where they can almost predict like, oh, I'm going to be in a bad mood, I'm going to see mom tonight, or I'm going to see so-and-so. You can almost trick your brain into what you want your brain to be like by the music you listen to before you have to go either, to combat or whatever else. So it could be aggressive or it could be passive. Either way you want to go.
Yeah, it's interesting you said going to combat because I remember very well, back in 2006, I did a lot of air assault missions. And, before every mission, we're all geared up, ready to go. We're all sitting in our cots and everyone's got their headphones on. It's like you see in the NBA or NFL, people walking in with their headphones. It's like everybody needs that moment of like, hey, we've done all of our checks. Now give me a minute to get my head in the right spot. And you can pull people's headphones back and you're like, that's loud, like everybody has their thing. I mean, if it was rap or rock or heavy metal, it didn't matter. But for me, I was actually playing a whole different style of music. That was actually a very violin led song by a rock group that plays. That's awesome. A lot of instrumental stuff. It was very calming, know. But people always made fun of me, like, "What are you listening to?" I'm like, This puts me in a good. It puts me in a good place, man. Like we're about to go get shot at. I'm like, I promise you, I'll still shoot back. This is better.
Yeah. Well, but I
So
think that's even part of it too, right? So if you think about music that allows your brain to find like that zone, like the it factor, right?
yeah.
And then there's other music that creates chaos.
Hmm.
So if you're trying to mentally be in the right spot, you may not want to be 100% amped. You maybe want to maybe be 80% amped or
Yeah.
85% amped, but like giving your brain that 15% of clarity so that you're not just like complete rage mode. You're
Yeah.
only in like 80% rage, so you can still think, but still,
Yeah.
go in there and get the job done.
Allow adrenaline to fill the gap.
Yeah,
So
which always happens, right?
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very fascinating. I think it's awesome what y'all are doing. And for anybody who's never been to a tattoo, you're missing out. It's obviously I've performed in plenty of Twilight tattoos, and when I first got to the old guard, I remember being like, "What are we doing?" Like this,
Yeah,
because you're just like you come from a combat unit, and you're like, "What the," and
yeah, yeah.
because your understanding of like, "Oh, I'm going to march in ceremonies, I'm going to march in funerals. I got it. We do retirements," and then like no one in the brochure tells you that you do these Twilight tattoo things, and I remember going out there and being like, this is kind of cool. Like it's completely different. I mean, it's complete. The old guards was, if those have never seen it, is Revolutionary War all the way through modern day, and they kind of just jump through the uniforms and battles and music and whatnot. And you, Mark, I remember very
Mm,
well the 2018 season.
mm.
The drum line had the coolest drumline solo. I think, in all my years being around the old guard, I was like, this is it. They should just play this every year on repeat.
Oh,
It
I
was
love it.
it was awesome. So,
Thank you.
but but so on that note, in talking about old guard days and Fife and Drum Corps, and I can only imagine the amount of stories that you have of meeting. I mean, good gosh, went to Australia and got to hang out there for a while, and you probably in 20 years in the old guard, you've been through a couple presidents
Yep,
and
yep.
a couple White House visits and stuff. So, I mean, you've got to have some like unbelievable stories. So I'll pass the mic to you and just let you go.
No, I appreciate it. Yes, it's a 20-year permanent assignment, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah,
And just like, I mean, especially leaving and leading that organization at the end of my career. And what was very interesting is I got the chance to do some policy writing on behalf of Army Music at the very end of my career, and thinking about just how small the group of folks are that are able to go and have that effect on what is the future of Army music. And a lot of people don't think about it until the bands are gone.
yeah.
And that was one of the big things that honestly, there's a chief CW5 Graff, retired Aaron Graff, dear friend of mine. I have to give him a shout out because he changed the way I thought about the job. And he always said, the further that the musicians are away from the war fighting function, then there's almost no need for them. It's nice to have them in parades. It's nice to have them for recruiting, which now we see this huge challenge with recruiting. But
Yeah.
what's the policy? What's the secondary mission? And, we would play at Walter Reed multiple times a year. We'd go to San Antonio. We'd go to BAMC. We'd play at the Burns Center multiple times throughout my career. And you're playing for wounded warriors, guys that are coming off the line, and they just want a normal day in their life. They want to interact and have that normal piece of just music and fun, and treat me like a human, right? And I guess the first story I can definitely, I mean, I grew up Irish Catholic in New York, so I feel I'm guilty about everything,
We can
right?
go that far back if you want.
No, but I mean, I remember one of my first moments where we were down in San Antonio. We play the show for the staff at BAMC, and it was great. Everyone enjoyed it, and the commander came over. Chief Warrant Officer Pace came over. Jeannie Pace. I think she was the longest serving female chief warrant officer, but she came up and she said, "Look, there are some folks that are from the clinic. They really want you to come and have lunch with some of the severe cases." And I mean, from immediately, I was like, "Yes, I'm in. Let's go." And so I'm probably maybe 22 years old. I'm going to go down there and do whatever I can go do. And I don't know if this is the real story, but it's what I've told myself. As I'm on the elevator, and I do remember the elevator opening, and I remember there was a soldier coming towards me in a wheelchair, head to toe in bandages, and whatever skin you could see was completely a blister. And I sat there going, there's something in me. Like I have to do something more with my career and my life if I'm going to be able to play a drum on behalf of the army and be at the White House, be at the Pentagon, and be the face of the army. And this 19-year-old kid, and I have no idea if this kid was 19 or not, but I'm telling myself this 19-year-old
Right.
kid can never live a normal day of their life ever again. I've got to do everything in my power to just, be there, play for
Wow.
folks, inspire folks. And so that was, I mean, honestly, a very early moment in my career where I knew I wasn't just going to play the drum to play the drum. When we went to Twilight, when we would go in the White House, you knew that the drum was a tool. Like you were there
Yeah.
to inspire other people, get kids fired up, get people proud of being an American. And I will say it's funny to do that when you're wearing a red coat and everybody
Yeah.
thinks you're British.
Oh, it's not the red coat, it's the wig, I promise.
Yeah, no, so I mean that was a big one. A funny one though, I mean, this is the other part of this is that the old guard is obviously the official escort to the president. And so you're doing all these high level performances and you hope to God that none of the mistakes make it on TV.
Yeah.
And
True.
and what I do say is our British counterparts, I love them because I get to meet the guys that do the stuff for the Queen or now the King, and they're at the household division in London. When those guys are trooping the color and they're on parade and one falls out, they have a medic squad that comes out there with the cot and like
Yeah.
they roll them on there. And it's like, I'm glad we kind of handle it a little bit more delicately when
Yeah.
somebody falls out.
Just drag them out.
Yeah, it's drag 'em. So yeah, on that note, here's a crazy one. We were doing, I believe it was Honorable Panetta's changeover,
Hmm.
SecDef. So we were doing one of the changeovers, and I remember it was after, I believe it was after Easter. And so we're doing the pass, actually the wasn't pass and review, it was sound off. We were doing
Okay.
sound off in the middle of the ceremony, and Pershing Zone, the army band, and the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps come forward. They cross paths, they do a counter march, and they weave in and out of each other.
Yeah.
And I remember we would always kind of play these games where the drummers from the Old Guard or the drummers from Pershing Zone would try to steal each other's sticks as they were crossing through. And
Oh
we
no.
get really close, and like everyone's really gripping the sticks. You're like, you're not going to get my sticks, you're not going to get my sticks. And I remember like getting super close to Ed Aston, who was in Pershing Zone. And as people started going for the sticks, there's called a snare strainer on the end of your snare drum. So it's how you tune the snares on the bottom of a snare drum. Well, there's a little protrusion there. And our snare strainer is actually connected on the drums and hooked together. And we couldn't get them undone. So we're completely smashing into people and like C-SPAN cameras are all on us and stuff like, oh,
Oh.
this is horrible. I hope it didn't get on there. And so as that happens, I'm actually watching the drum major gutting ready for the counter march, and something is clicking, and it's Rusty Smith. And Rusty Smith gives the counter march with the Espon tune. And as he throws it, he drops it. And so like basically everything is falling apart in this part of the ceremony. And so anyway, long story short, we went back and found out none of it made it on C-SPAN, but if somebody had, I think we would all have been fired
Oh
that day.
gosh. That's people who don't know the old guard is like, I remember I came from, predominantly I came from an artillery unit, as an officer, and what gets you in trouble there, is probably go put you in jail trouble. And then you go to the old guard and it's like, no, your foot was about an inch to the right. And you're like, what?
Right.
How did you even see that? And then right after a ceremony, there's that hot wash where everybody gets together, and like I was like, man, I remember standing like doing my right seat ride and just observing that. And I was like, man, we are critical of each other.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
but then you start doing it and you start realizing until you go do someone's funeral, you know and the tune guards especially, they'll talk about it, whenever they do the what are the flights called,
The honor flights.
honor flights, yeah, honor flights, I want to say
Yeah.
hero,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And you get these people there that are predominantly 80% of them are in wheelchairs,
Yeah.
and when they play taps, on a wreath, and you see people like haven't stood up who knows when, but they make that effort to stand up. And it's like for us that are currently serving, we're like, man, we stand up and we salute at
Right.
taps. But it means something to some people. And as the more you do that, the more serious you take it. Like, yes, they won't see my foot being an inch in the wrong direction, but we all do, and we are our biggest critics on purpose because the whole mission has a purpose, and
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of fun to be there,
Yeah.
and
Well, and I think this one thing that's interesting. I mean, we used to do a show called Spirit of America as well, and it
oh
would
yeah,
go around. And
yeah,
I remember, you'd have, folks in the crowd, and you'd play the service songs at the end of each of the performances, and you'd see these World War II vets, these Vietnam vets who are struggling, just like you're saying, like get out of their chair, get out of
yeah,
their wheelchair, and stand. And I just remember seeing like these grandkids looking at their grandparents, and they
yeah,
were superheroes to them. So I
oh
mean,
yeah,
that idea of what we see as a mistake, but that idea of just chasing perfection,
yeah,
which is impossible, you're never going to get it, but the closer you get, you're just honoring that service with the attention to detail.
yeah. I think it's on that exact note, though, I think those grandparents and I was at Veterans Day just a few months ago, and 2 months ago now, and there was a little girl in my daughter's class, and her dad and granddad came to lunch because they had this big deal for lunch, and her granddad served, but her dad did not. And he was in the Air Force and cool dude. And as they're talking, I noticed that they're 7 years old. They just talk about themselves. They don't know better, But I said, "Hey, what branch of service was your granddad in?" She's like, I don't know. Was he Army, Air Force, Marine?" And she's like, "I don't know." And like I opened the doorway with this
Mm,
simple question for her to, he's like, "Oh, I was in the Air Force." She's like, "You were in the Air Force?" You know, and
love it.
like, and then they chatted for like 2 or 3 minutes about it, but like it could have just been a deal she just didn't know. And I think that's where tattoos and Spirit of America and what you're doing at Washington Tattoo and everything else is so important because it opens that door. Like, Grandpa,
Hmm.
why did you stand up and salute when they were playing that song? It's like, because it's taps,
Right, right, right.
and like you just don't not stand up and salute when you
Yeah.
hear taps.
And I
So,
love that. I mean, the whole thing too with the discussion of, at a certain age, it's all about you, right? And even as a
right.
professional, I feel like you get to a point in your career where, yes, you have to strive for personal excellence, whatever that looks like in whatever career field. And then you start to recognize that you're part of something else. Like there is more of a story to the company you're a part of, to the regiment you're a part of, to the, even if you're working in the corporate or nonprofit world, there's something bigger that you're a part of, right? And so you
Yeah.
start looking at how you fit. Like, how do my skills fit with Jimmy's skills or Timmy or Sally's skills? And you start like going, well, wait, if we can connect together, obviously, we work better as a team. And I think obviously it's super cliche, but you start to see when things don't go really well.
Yeah.
Obviously, way faster than when they do. Because when they go
Absolutely.
well, you just expect it to go well. You're like, oh, yeah, of course, it's supposed to work like that.
Yeah.
When it doesn't, and you're a part of the thing failing, you go, oh, and you figure out the 10 ways to not do it that way.
Right.
But then it's almost to this point where if you get into a rhythm, and I forget, it was a podcast, it was on a Bigger Pockets podcast for real estate, and Brandon Turner, I think, was talking about this whole idea of competency, right? And you can't be competent if you're not confident,
Yep.
right? So and you can't be confident unless you've put in the effort and the hours to actually know how to do whatever the skill is, right? So you have an X amount of hours you have to put towards it. A lot of people say like the 10,000 hour rule,
Right.
and now I've got 10,000 hours. Now I can be confident in that skill because I've done it so much. But then other people will start to recognize that I'm competent in that skill set, and then I can start deploying that in other areas. And what's crazy about that is once you start looking at that, and I look back on my old guard career, once you've done that enough times, you start recognizing, yeah, it's not about you. It's how many other people can I
Oh yeah.
get be competent in their other skills? And you start
Yeah.
learning the drum is just a tool. Communication is just a tool. Pressing your uniform is just a tool. Like all these little acts to
Oh yeah.
become confident into your competency are really just tools to make sure that we're passing this on to the next generation. And I think what you just said is really a powerful thing about being proud of being an American. What does that
Yeah.
look like moving forward? And how does the military set people up for success in the future? And I think you hear the horror stories, but there are a lot of great ones out there too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I actually had the podcast two before this. I haven't released it yet, but talking to a guy named Kevin Doe, and I was telling him I was a former recruiter many years ago before I learned how to read a pay chart and crossover. But I said, Joe, I was like, why do we not have any commercials about the Army values? Or
Mm,
no commercials about the warrior ethos. I'm like, we have people that meet these things.
Yeah.
I'm personally attached to one of them. Major Ivan Castro, got blinded in combat
Wow.
and ran and stayed in the army for 12 more years. He was my PL,
Yeah.
and I emailed my leadership and you start back in the day. I was like, why do we not have a commercial saying "I will never quit"? And
Yeah.
just have his face and him running. I mean, he wears a shirt that has a big old army star on it. On the back of it says "I will never quit." And
Yeah, I love it.
the guy holding the shoelace that leads him where he's going has the same shirt, and in the back of his says "I will never leave a fallen comrade."
Yeah,
I'm
love it.
like, they're a walking PR,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
100%.
And Ivan's hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Guy and a great personality, and it helps when you're a former Green Beret. And but he's he did 12 years blind and took command, went to the maneuver career course and all this stuff. And I'm like, we have a walking PR guy right here, and
Yep.
or you can do Shoe Gordon, which is always Black Heart
Mhm.
Down Snipers, which is whole different version of not never leave someone behind, but get Marcus Durant to talk. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think what you're doing is one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle as far as its influence for people, and to not forget, because I think people forget. And
Yeah.
I love that about the tattoo is it's like I mean, I remember just being, I was on, I marched out with staff. Like we walked
Mhm.
out, we saluted, we walked off, and that was my entire performance, but watching everything go through, and you kind of forget, like, dude, Korea was a pretty rough war,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Vietnam was this. We were familiar with Vietnam because that's my parents' generation,
Mhm.
but like World War II is like, man, I watched Band of Brothers just a couple months ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, they don't have body armor. That sucks.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly. Right.
and they have blood clot or quick clot or their version of quick clot back then, and now we have
Mhm.
tourniquets. I'm like, we've learned so much. I'm like, yeah, we've come a long ways. That was rough.
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, when I look at just the idea of the tattoo itself, and you think about what does that all look like in the 21st century, and a lot of folks don't have answers. And I think, back in the day, we'd always say like, suck it up. Which, okay, there is definitely a part of that. Like you've got to
Oh
have the
yeah,
grit. You've got to have enough grit to get through it, right? So there's that balance, and I think there's that emotional, the EQ piece, the emotional quality of folks, and saying, can you be a strong enough leader to recognize when someone's like legit broken,
right,
or is it a grit, is a grit
right.
factor? And that's hard because I
That's
mean,
a
as a leader,
hard thing. Yeah,
and as a leader, like you're trying to get your stuff done, you're trying to get everybody else's stuff done, and then you've
yeah,
got the folks that you need to encourage and however you
yeah.
need to encourage them. But I just a quick story. I mean, we talk about PTSD and we talk about the greatest generation, and there's a lot of folks that talk about, well, there's just more grit. There was a lot more grit. There's a lot more grit. Well, probably. I would say like there's things about it that yes and no, because my grandfather, and I tell the story occasionally, but I think it's appropriate for this, that I grew up in New York. My parents are from the Bronx. My grandparents grew up in New York City, and it was tough. Like they were a bunch of tough Irish folks.
Oh yeah.
And my favorite grandfather taught me how to throw a baseball, how to go fishing, and he died when I was 5. And I had
Oh
no
no.
idea why, but I knew he was in the Army. I knew he was in World War II in the Pacific. I just did, but that's all I knew. And then so fast forward, I'm 11. I start taking drum lessons from a guy named Nick Antanasio in Brooklyn, New York. I had no idea. I become one of Nick's students. I start winning some drumming championships, and he starts taking me to gigs in New York City. So I'm going to Hoboken, New Jersey, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and I'm meeting Nick's friends who are, air quotes here. They are, contemporaries of Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, playing with Miles Davis, playing for Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
And Nick was 75 when I was 11. So immediately I was just
Wow.
like wrapping my brain around like I'm a kid. I don't know any better. These are just people.
They're old
And
guys. That's all I know.
yeah, that's it. I was like, these old crazy guys. And so Nick would always say to me, he's like, be a sponge wherever you are. Just try to learn as much as you can. And at 11 years old, meant nothing. And then at 13, he starts talking about, you can't keep this. Like all these lessons I'm giving you, like you can't keep them. You can only give them to others. And I, again, made no sense. I fast forward, I graduate from college, and my mother ends up handing me a pair of drumsticks. And I was like old beat up pair. I'm like, oh, these are cool. These from, my drum teacher, Nick. And she goes, no, these are from your grandfather. And I
Oh,
went,
wow.
are you kidding me? And so I've got a picture up here, over here on my shoulder with that she hands me. And so my mother hands me the sticks. She hands me two photographs. One is him in the Pacific during World War II, looking beat to hell. And I found out he was in the 29th New York in the island hopping campaigns. Basically, the Army would go in afterwards and clean up after the Marines would go in. And he was in Okinawa. He was in Saipan. I mean,
Wow.
just probably saw stuff that no other human being should ever see. And he was infantry. So, I mean, he
Oh,
was
yeah.
in the mix, right? And the second photograph she hands me is from 1938. And he's in a cadet uniform. And he was in an American Legion drum and bugle corps with a snare drum across his hip. And I went, this is crazy. Like, neither of my parents played music. So this has been this mission for me, obviously, that my grandfather did all of this. And then later on, my mother, of course, we're good Irish Catholics. We don't talk about our problems. And she, when I was old enough, she said, so your grandfather hated the Army. The day he got back, he left his duffel bag and everything else at Grand Central Station, never talked about it, never wanted to have anything to do with the Army when he left. The day he turned 65, he left the VA in New York and stepped in front of a truck and killed himself. And so, like, for me, this is very personal. It's very professional. Going back to that kid at BAMC, like, all of this stuff, I can't make all of the sense of this, but I know for me, there's something in my being that's saying, if the Washington tattoo existed when my grandfather was considering committing suicide, could the two of us have ever played drums together? And I get chills thinking about it right now. I'll never know the answer to that, but like, that is 100% our life's mission, is that if we can get people introduced to music where they can bring their kids, their grandkids, their spouse, and they can just have a good time together over a beer or a whiskey and some drumsticks or a guitar or a piano, we've got access to all that stuff, then we're doing what we were put on this earth to do.
Man, that is, if that is an mission statement, I don't know what is. Thanks for sharing that. I'm kind of at a loss for words on that. But this talk about this podcast as being a place for people to tell their story, and there's some funny ones, and then there's some ones that are kind of get you in the heart. That definitely does it. And I'm sorry to hear that. But it's a full circle moment for sure to see
Yeah.
what you're doing now and how it is and how that mission never stops. And it's kind of why I started this podcast, is a similar reason that I've already shared a different episode. But man,
Well,
good.
I just got to say thank you for that too. I mean, that's such a unique niche, right? To allow folks to share that story, because obviously my grandfather never shared that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I've had uncles and cousins that were older than me that were in Vietnam and they didn't make it home. And so there's all of this, how do you're never going to fully reconcile it. But if you've got a bunch, your band of brothers, not to be cliche, but if you've got them and you can lean on them, then you're not alone. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing, is none of us are really alone. We just have to find the right resource.
And so, I think Sebastian Junger calls it his tribe. If you've read his book, it's a great book. Well, on that note, let's kind of wrap this up. But what can somebody do if they're listening? How can they get involved and help or support Washington Tattoo?
No, thank you very much. Yeah, we have a website, www.thewashingtontattoo.com. So on there, if people want to volunteer, they can volunteer their time. That's great. If people want to donate to any of the programs, Rudiments to Recovery, Rudiments to Opportunity, we also have a scholarship that's for my Uncle Johnny, who is also Army veteran and FDNY and NYPD. So if they want to get involved with supporting the scholarship or any of those programs, you can donate there as well. So anyway, people want to hop in, there's definitely multiple ways to contribute.
Oh, awesome. Well, Mark, thanks a lot for being a guest on today's show, and we look forward to many more in the future. Let's get you and Dave in the same room at the same time.
That'd be fun.
Be a great time for sure. So, but for everybody out there, if this is your first time listening, by all means, subscribe. Many more episodes to come, and we'll see you on the next episode.